First of all, I just wanted to give everyone a bit of an opportunity to introduce themselves and their company, and also just give a few thoughts from the perspective of their country, respectively Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, how those energy needs can actually be met and how they see the opportunities evolving in their country. Fazil, let's start with you. Everyone's got a microphone.
Thank you, Milo. Fazil, Alfitri from Medco Power. I started Medco Power basically about 10 years ago. If you look at Indonesia power market right now, you will notice that the ratio of electricity is only 80%. So 80% of the people, which is about 250 million, you're talking about 50 million Indonesian right now without electricity. So that's a very huge demand. And even if that demand fulfilled, it's still maybe 1/10 of Singapore. Even if Indonesia has 100% electricity ratio, that ratio basically still 1/10 of Singapore. So for me, where I sit, where I look at the projects happening in my country, we have, I think, huge demand that nobody can fulfill. Even state utility, PLN, even if they try to install maybe 5,000, 6,000 megawatt per year within the next 10 years, they will still not be able to meet the demand. So it's a very huge task, huge undertaking. And where Medco Power plays, basically, we are focusing only on the west side of Indonesia. We like 50 to 100 megawatt kind of project. We don't do a big power project. We do what I call distributed power generation. We are focused more into renewable, and we have basically 9 major projects right now under construction. 2 geothermal right now going on, one in North Sumatra called Sarula. We have 5 hydro projects under construction. And also huge operation maintenance in Central Java, and also asset that we own in Batam Island and also South Sumatra. So, you know, very exciting time for me playing at the Indonesian power market. I think this is where the demand is, and being there for the past 10 years, going up and down into the Indonesian power sector, politically turbulence and so on, I would say that Indonesia is going to be the next wave. You know, I mean, like to bring more interest from other parties around the world to help us out, because for us to develop or to be able to sort of serve the demand, Indonesia is basically an undaunting task. So it's a very, very huge task that one party can do. So maybe that is my summary.
Great, thank you. Roslina, your thoughts, please, from Malaysia's point of view.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting Tenaga Nasional to this event. We are very pleased to be here. Tenaga Nasional is one of the premier utilities in Malaysia. The installed capacity in Malaysia is about 21,500 megawatts. And we are growing at about 3 to 4% per year. So it translates to about 500 megawatts a year. So what the government has done is to encourage more participation in the generation industry. The government has already embarked on what we call competitive bidding process. And most of the new generation coming up are all put on bid. So Tenaga, as well as IPPs, and also it's also recently open to international companies to bid into the power sector. So with regards to the generation mix and so on, I think what Milo said is correct. If you look only at prices, you would see that the new generation infrastructure coming up would normally go towards coal. But unfortunately, due to environmental considerations, Malaysia has also undertaken to make sure that we do not contribute too much on the carbon emissions. So we are also looking at other sources of generation. For your information, we have already, Malaysia has already commissioned the RGT terminal by Petronas last year. So it is generating about 500 million standard cubic feet. So that is going to go a long way towards the energy security or gas security for the country. And just to add on a bit, the energy security for Malaysia has taken a new meaning for the past few years, from 2011 to 2013, because of the gas constraint. So because of gas constraint, we have incurred something like 4 billion ringgit due to the burning of alternative fuel. So because of that, then we are actually looking at other sources, having LNG coming in. We are also looking at other sustainable development, ensuring that security of supply, not only at the generation, also logistics, fuel stocks, and so on, become some kind of a priority for the country. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Irwin, your thoughts?
Yeah, as the only Singaporean here, certainly we would like to welcome to Singapore all our foreign delegates. Hope that you enjoy the stay in this little garden state. Unlike Indonesia and Malaysia, it is a city-state. And in terms of the energy resources, certainly we are not in a position to go big on wind and for that matter, solar. In Singapore, 90% of our fuel source are gas. And the government is intensely pushing for further diversification, as we have also recently commissioned our LNG terminal down in Jurong Island. And 90% of our energy source are gas, and certainly Singapore Power Group is also seeing gas as a growing area in Singapore. A bit on Singapore Power, we are the sole electricity and gas T&D network owner and operator in the country. And Singapore has also gone ahead to deregulate its market. So at the generation and retail end, it is fully competitive. Many of the gencos are private-owned, if not foreign-owned. And for Singapore Power, we are in the center, the transmission and distribution segment, and we are regulated by the Energy Market Authority of Singapore. As a company, we have been around for, if you trace back the history, 100 years, but incorporated as a private entity for the last coming to 20 years. Balance sheet of 17 billion, and we also have a significant investment in Australia. And my role in the company is I look after the regulatory management. So as a regulated business, our scope of responsibility cover the regulatory strategy, regulatory development, and all the tariff matter for the company. I've been in the industry for, slightly more than 20 years, and covering having a role in the power plant O&M, the so-called investment M&A, and before taking up this regulatory function. And certainly would be happy to engage all of you to learn more as in how we are able to satisfy the needs of our customer, being in the power industry.
Thank you very much. So that sets the scene a little bit across the three different countries. I just wanted to focus a little bit more on Indonesia at the moment. I'm sure that some of you in the audience are looking at investment opportunities and the like, and there's an election coming up. Already done, yeah. How has that changed the investment climate, or how do you think that will change the investment climate for Indonesia's power sector? And are there particular areas that you focus on, you think has the biggest opportunity?
Yeah. People, when you look at Indonesia, the country basically full democracy right now. Has been in democracy maybe since '98 probably. Even now, probably for the past 10 years, all the government official, all the parliamentary people as well as the presidential candidates are elected by the people, directly elected. No more like before where you have a strong political party and that party basically nominate one person. Now it's basically everything is a toss. So we has gone into this process, the election in 2014. That has been done very well. In fact, almost no impact to the turbulence in the political situation and so on. People are basically right now betting on who's going to be the next president of Indonesia. And they've already basically named names that basically going, maybe 3-4 names that basically already identified that's going to take Indonesia the next 5 years. So it's going to be stable, and has been proven stable for the past, I would say, 14 years. No, in fact, yeah, more since 90 years. So from my point of view, we are focusing on something that basically not typical development for power sector, because I leave that to PLN or to the state utility to really do whatever they want. But Medco Power basically focusing on something that is not basically touched by the government, which is more into the renewable platform. Of course, when we start up this company, we do gas-fired power project, combined cycle power project, and so on. But in the long run, from now, maybe until the next 20 years, we're going to be focusing more into geothermal and hydros, because those are basically the power generation that we feel not only indigenous in Indonesia, but is abundant and also is going to be sustainable. Because when you design a power company, I think you have to think about how your power company is going to survive beyond 50 years. Cannot just run this IPP business or IPP company just only live for one contract or two contracts, you know. So you have to design something that is going to be sustainable, it's going to last a long time. So therefore, when we designed this power company, Medco Power started 10 years ago, we designed into clean energy platform. And the platform has been set. You know, we are executing our projects right now. By 2015, 16, 17, all those projects is going to become on stream.
Because you've recently closed the Sarula geothermal project in terms of its financing. That was a big deal.
Yes.
Is that the first of many projects that are now actually going to start the proper development process, or is that a fluke that happened because of regulatory approval?
It's going to be the first of many geothermal projects coming on stream. Sarula is not easy to do. I mean, just to explain to the audience here, Sarula is basically $1.6 billion project. The debt amount is about 1.2 billion, basically funded by JBIC, ADB, and 6 multilateral banks. And Medco Power is the single largest shareholder, along with Kyushu Electric, Itochu, and Ormat. So when we bid this project in 2004, you know, so it's all basically about 10 years. So that's why I said, when you do big project like this, it's going to take time. But it takes time to change the mindset from the government, because the natural resources on the ground under Indonesian constitution law belong to the state. So how could you do power project financing if that asset belongs to the state? So that's why it takes time for us to change the paradigm. Change the paradigm that say, okay, it belongs to the state still, but we manage it for the next 30 years. And during that 30 years, we could collateralize it to the lenders. So the lenders can loan us project financing, non-recourse, right? Mm-hmm. And then after the loan is repaid, basically goes back to the state. That takes time. But I'm sure this is the first successful. We have changed the paradigm. And all the remaining geothermal project is going to be coming on stream like this, you know.
So how many gigawatts is that going to be in 2020?
Well, government has a very big push. I think if you talk only for geothermal, they're talking about 500 megawatts per year, which is impossible to do. I'm only focusing on my 330 megawatt that's going to be coming on stream on 2016 and 17. Oh. You know, but there are other developers that basically developing similar projects. Somebody like Supreme Energy, somebody like Star Energy. They are developing geothermal project. You know, Sumitomo, GDF Suez, and so on. They are also try to do this. And we have proven over and over again right now that actually when you talk sense to the government and you can really tell your story right? And what's the benefit for the country and for the people, not only for yourself, right? You can get it done. Because if you look at Indonesia right now, we have to move away from the fossil fuel energy. That's a must. Because I think they already realize it now that oil in Indonesia may be only going to be there for the next 10 years, gas maybe for the next 30 years, and coal maybe for the next 50 years. So if you don't change your energy resources to more sustainable, renewable way, right? The country is going to be fully dependent on imports in the next 10 years, you know.
The question is whether governments sufficiently realize that and put the policies in place in order to
They have started realizing this when they noted that every year now they have to pay fuel import about 30 billion a year. And they're still giving subsidy for the fuel, but now they are lifting up the subsidy for the fuel. That's the name of the game now. The name of the game right now is government try to lift the subsidy, but how to lift the subsidy without making too much impact to the people, making too much impact, making too much political trouble and so on. Yeah. So slowly they have started doing it. I think they are already doing it. They are giving incentive for renewable company like us to do more renewable project, to help them out in terms of regulation and so on and so on.
So, and that's a topic that's obviously very important for Malaysia as well in terms of the subsidies to the electricity payers. How is Malaysia dealing with that? And obviously, if you're talking about the LNG terminal, as I said, LNG is not cheap. If you import it right now on a long-term contract, you're paying somewhere around $15 to $16 per million BTU. How can TNB manage the profitability of that, of investments in gas-fired power generation over the next few years? And how much capacity do you see being installed in the country by TNB?
Thank you very much. Okay, one of the things that has been done by the country starting 1st of January 2014 is the introduction of what we call the incentive-based regulation. It's something that we think should have been done much earlier. So incentive-based regulation basically means that there is going to be real cost pass-through from generation, transmission, distribution to the customers. Okay, and in 1st January, right after the national elections, I think the government took a view that the subsidy that has been continuously given to the customers is not sustainable. So they have taken a view that we have got to move towards an economy where subsidies will be taken off, albeit it's slowly. So with the massive problems between 2010 to 2013, I think there's a realization that we need to pay what is worth for the resource. You see, because by paying so little for the resource, not much emphasis may be put on the maintenance and so on. So during 2011 to 2013, we have got massive outages on the platforms, gas platforms, on the east coast of Malaysia, and that has actually made Malaysia bear a cost of about 4 billion in terms of alternative fuel. And because of that, Petronas has built this RGT terminal, and early in the decision making, it was already agreed for LNG being imported into the country, the customers will have to pay market price. So right now, under the IBR, which is incentive-based regulation, the coal price is already market price. It's a pass-through, and then you have LNG price. It's totally market prices, so there is no element of subsidy there. The only element of subsidy is the pipeline gas price, and government has taken a view that it will be increased gradually from January every 6 months until the pipeline gas reaches a certain parity. So that is where sustainability and of fuel resources is. And because of the incentive-based regulation, this cost has already been inputted into the tariff. So we are part of the study group with the government. So when the IBR was designed, the assumptions made into the studies have already included LNG at market price, coal at market price, and also pipeline gas prices that will be increasing very gradually to the future. So there's also an element of the fuel cost pass-through. So with that, in 1st of January, we have seen a 15% increase in tariffs for Malaysia. It actually made a lot of people complain, but I think right now the public is more accepting. They realize that the subsidy given to them must be slowly removed. So we are looking at, okay, we have already achieved removal of subsidies in LNG and coal. So we are hoping that the subsidy for pipeline gas will go on. So because of that, the tariffs that is being given to Tenaga is enough, and it's sustainable to be able for us to build new infrastructure, not only by Tenaga Nasional and also by the IPPs. So you're looking at least we are seeing 2 big coal plants in Manjung, 2,000 megawatts being built by Tenaga. One of the coal plants is coming in next year in March, and another 2 plants under the Track 3B bidding process. Another 2 by 1,000 megawatts has already been awarded. It was already announced two months ago. So we are looking forward to another bidding for new generation. This time it will be on gas-fired power plants. So with that, we hope that and we see a lot of interest in the competitive bidding process, and we hope that this will create a sustainable electricity industry for Malaysia.
Interesting. And I just wanted to go back to one of your comments that you mentioned the market is opening up a little bit, and you've mentioned the IPPs becoming active. What kind of ramifications does that have for TNB's business, given that you're also, from generation to transmission to retail? Do you see that as a quickly growing market that is, reducing market share for TNB?
Yes. Okay. For Malaysia, for Tenaga Nasional, actually, we really want to win all the projects. We've been very active in the competitive bidding process, and to us, yes, we now hold something like a bit more than 50% of generation throughout Malaysia. We hope to increase that. We hold a lot. We have a lot of sites for generation facility planning, and we hope that we will be one of the main players. And we think that we've got advantage over some other IPPs because of the sites that we have. Definitely, we are not happy that our share is being eroded. Something that we think that we want to emerge again as a more dominant player in Malaysia. And also, not only that, we also having some discussions with Indonesia to have a partnership to improve the interconnection. And also, we are also looking at improving our image abroad and participating in generation projects abroad.
Fair. Thank you very much. And then moving on to Singapore, Harun, we know that Singapore has got plenty of capacity in place. So on the generation side, you don't need any further investments, at least for the time being. Some of which will come through a bit of PV for which the limit was just raised by the EMA. But for the transmission distribution side, where you're active, how do you see the regulatory environment changing? Do you feel it's beneficial for further investments in T&D infrastructure? Do you feel it's necessary? And where is that going to happen?
Yeah, I will agree with your opening statement that indeed we are now, into a new era. But probably I will just touch on a few fundamental, and then we can move on to look at what holds for us in the future. I think the first principle we always champion in particularly the market facing or rather open market kind of power market, is that to continue to have investment and make it sustainable to enhance the security. Paramount importance is this sector must remain attractive to the investor. And a case in point, maybe you just look at Singapore. We have gone through the journey. Over the years, you have seen, we are privileged to be able to enjoy high level of reliability and, for that matter, even high reserve margin, which our Genco friends here probably will not, feel as good as I do as a consumer. And you can see that one key element we are able to observe is that majority of the public infrastructure has so far been funded by private money. And the Gencos, are all foreign-owned, or private-owned. And even for Singapore Power, over the last 10 years, we have invested 5 billion or so into our network. And a lot of it, or rather, sizable amount is all primarily tapping into the international capital market. But in today's context, what we are seeing is that, the regulatory framework has been good, but it has to be consistently and have some form of progressiveness to adapt to the market in order to sustain the investment that is able to attract. And particularly in today's context, when you're seeing the US Federal Reserve, their action is in turn creating a fair bit of volatility in the capital market, be it the interest rate, or every country's sovereign cost, borrowing costs. And the regulatory framework, what we are seeing is that going forward must be able to adapt, not necessarily following a certain fixed concept, but to be able to look at the market and have a forward-looking perspective. Now, having said that, but while it is adapting, the regulatory principle underlying all those policy decisions should remain consistent, because what the investor do not want to see is quick changing policy decisions. There has to be certainty. When I put in the power plant, it is good for at least 20, 30, even 40 years. And similarly for the grid network, it is the same thing. We are investing upfront, and it takes us a long time to recover the investment. So the regulatory certainty is important. And to encourage all this competition, certainly we believe in open access, as well as a level playing field, allowing everyone to compete in a fair manner without so-called any prejudice one way or another. And lastly, to make it sustainable, we also need to put in place what we call the incentive framework. To the extent, all of us should be provided the incentive to continually improve on our cost structure, so that ultimately the consumer benefit, we benefit, and this is in turn what we call a sustainable and also what we talk about the security of the supply. This is something that will keep this industry going.
And actually, just to stay on the T&D side, smart grid will be a topic covered in the rest of the conference to a large degree. Globally, there's about 400 million smart meters installed, and that'll double in the next few years. Singapore has done some pilot programs, and if you talk about energy security, obviously one part is getting your supply from various sources, but also reducing your demand in one way or the other. So what kind of role do you see the smart grid, smart meters, storage, and potentially demand response as well play in Singapore, and in particular for Singapore Power?
In the Singapore context, being a city-state, we have the advantage of the high power density. And certainly the smart meter is something that we have introduced, having a few purposes, one of which is in allowing more customers to be able to benefit from the competitive power market. And then extending it to what we call the intelligence network operation. By having meters that are smart, we are in turn able to know the dynamics of the network failure. To the extent even my workman has finished up one site, the meter will be turned alive. And in turn, in terms of resource deployment, certainly we are able to then know that the work has been done. So my fellow colleagues would have to then move on to the next job. We will have that visibility. And in terms of the smartness of it, smart grid is actually a very wide term used in many ways. But we do see that smart grid is in turn able to allow us to so-called work the asset harder, the smart network. In terms of condition monitoring, all those things that we have put in place are also what we call some form of a smart grid system. And when you talk about, just now we talk about this changing landscape with distributed generation coming in place and so forth, what we are seeing is also a trend that we are, in terms of the T&D space, we are seeing ourselves in a traditional means way, we are the one that bring the power from the GenCo to the consumer. And with now having distributed generation, we are seen a term called prosumer, producer and consumer. And this is in turn creating a different, what we call may even trigger a paradigm shift in terms of the T&D business model, whereby we are no longer just infrastructure that everybody will use. The prosumer would use less of us and maybe not even use us. And then this in turn call for a rethink as in what is the revenue model for the T&D space. And certainly with distributed generation everywhere, or in a so-called widespread manner, the network in turn will have to, not just a passive network bringing power one way, but it will in turn be having the ability to manage the multiple flow and the more dynamic flow of the power. So there will be call for changes in the intelligence of it, the power system, operation will in turn also have to accommodate for that.
No, interesting. Well, the regulatory environment is key on that front, allowing distributed generation and smart meters and demand response. And from our point of view, there's quite a lot of things that the Singapore government can still do in order to allow for a little bit more development on that front. I think EMA just raised the limit for intermittent generation to 600 megawatts, which, if you use a low capacity factor, is about 2% of generation for Singapore. Just to put that into perspective, Germany in Q1 of this year had about between 20 and 25% of intermittent generation, i.e. solar and wind. So it's a very conservative target, which can be advanced a lot more. And renewables is obviously something that a lot of investors are looking at, as in addition to gas and coal. Just on Malaysia and TMB, what is TMB doing on the renewable front? Which programs or projects are you aiming to close over the next few years, specifically for renewables?
Thank you. The renewables energy in Malaysia is a bit slow because we started a bit late. The government's target is for renewable energy to be about 5% of generation mix by 2015. So that accounts about nearly 1,000 megawatts. Okay, so some of those will be met through the feed-in tariff mechanism. But the feed-in tariff mechanism is only until the capacity of about 30 megawatts. So Tenaga is not going to be in the FIT business. That is not where we aim to be. We want to be a player in the renewables industry. So we have just signed an agreement with another company for about 50 megawatts of solar. So that is intended to go up to somewhere to 500 megawatts in future. So the time frame for the 500 is still in the planning stage, but that's where we are. We're going to be focusing on as a good corporate citizen. That's where we are going, and being one of the largest utility in Malaysia, we have to set the pace for introducing more renewables into the system. So we are looking at about 500 megawatts of renewables coming into the system, which is not going to be supported by FIT. Thank you.
Interesting. So that's a PPA, direct PPA.
Direct PPA.
Because solar is, if we track the costs down, I think quite a number of countries now have reached the stage of $100 per megawatt hour in terms of levelized cost for solar, which, if you think about a gas plant and you pay $15 per million BTU, you're probably around the same figure, $100 a megawatt hour. Obviously, you've got a complete difference in terms of generation profile, small intermittent generation from solar and constant high capacity factors for gas. But it's starting to become economic, so it's interesting to see the trend. Is that PT.Medco? Are you looking at solar as well, or do you shy away from it?
No, the way that we look is we look at all kind of green energy technology, but of course, when you have these kind of opportunities like what we are having in Indonesia, where so much demand, so much resources, and so on, you tend to look at the simplest thing that you can do first before going into the more complex thing. So for us, the simplest thing is actually developing what we call the run-of-river hydro projects and also the geothermal projects. We look at biomass power development as well, and also solar development. Wind in Indonesia is available, but maybe not as much compared to other countries because we are in the equator. So biomass, the capacity in a biomass is actually on the supply itself. So if you want to develop the biomass power project, then you need to basically have a very strong relationship with the supplier of the waste. Then that's become another complexity. So we like the simplest one, which is the mini hydro and also the geothermal project, primarily because geothermal for us, Medco is predominantly drilling company in the past. So we know how the resource assessment and also drilling to be made. So from our point of view, those are the two that we like for the time being.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. I think we're going to leave it at that. I will give some time for the audience to ask any question.
I think now everybody is thinking of go further into renewables. And in Asia, like the 3 countries, what's the major drive to move toward this new energy sources? Is it because of the prices of conventional or environment or any other drive? Can any of the panelists comment on that, please? Thank you.
Okay. For Indonesia, I think the drive to go into renewables is more into the limited amount of resource for fossil fuel hydrocarbon. In the case of Indonesia, when you talk about fuel security, fuel mix security, right now we are probably depleting very fast our natural resources, fossil, oil, gas, and coal. That is going to be expired. Like what I said, oil in Indonesia maybe is going to be available for the next 10 years. Beyond 10 years, we have to import oil, all oil. When I started working in '91, Indonesia is producing about 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. We are a member of OPEC at the time. Right now, Indonesia only producing about 800,000 barrels of oil, where the demand for oil per day in Indonesia is about 2 million barrels per day. So you're importing about 1.2 million barrels to Indonesia today, every day, which is huge burden for the government, because government is still giving subsidy to the use of liquid fuel, oil. Now, the gas abundant, but of course we export the gas to Japan, Korea, and to other countries. That also, domestic gas is increasing right now. I think domestic gas is huge increase for the past, I would say 5 years, usage of domestic gas. And coal basically now for export. So those resources are not going to last long. Gas might be for another 35 years, coal maybe another 50 years. So that's why government is actually having a wake-up call that they really need to push this. Because it has been dormant, like Milo was saying, it has been dormant for a long time. Back in 2004, when the fuel is still subsidized, nobody cares about doing geothermal project or doing hydro project. But now become a very, very stressing point, because $30 billion per day, $30 billion per year, Indonesia has to pay for the import of oil. That basically strain the government budget. So they are basically giving incentive for a company like us to go into more renewable power project. Of course, for me, the simplest way, the one that we know more abundant in Indonesia, is in geothermal. Because that's a lot. And Indonesia is basically 40% of world geothermal is in Indonesia. So it's about 29 gigawatt, where it's only been exploited maybe less than 4%, So we are much less compared to Philippines, even though we have more, So this is why we are basically focusing our effort into that direction instead of doing the conventional way. Thank you.
Do you want to comment?
Okay, for Malaysia and basically for Tenaga Nasional, one of the reasons why we are moving to it is also to heed a call from the government to reduce carbon emissions, and also to make renewables into one of the generation mix in the whole country. And for Tenaga Nasional also, we would like to learn, because we don't want to be left behind. When everybody is going into solar renewables, we also want to learn, and we are also getting our subsidiary, which is TNEC and TNRD, to do R&D activities, and also to partner with companies in order to further the renewables target for Malaysia. And also, I think with the incentive-based regulation, there's already a regulatory instrument where we can go to the government and discuss with the government on whether the renewables that Tenaga is going to come in will be able to be put into the incentive-based regulation. So there are many fronts. Number one is to hit a call of government, and also I think the Prime Minister himself has actually asked companies to play an important role in reducing emissions. And thirdly is for Tenaga to actually, in Malaysia, to lead the move towards renewables. Thank you.
I think it was a very, very interesting session, a lot of diverse opinions, but you can clearly see that there's a lot of different focus areas for the countries, whether it's geothermal, hydro, coal, gas, solar, and then obviously on the T&D side, there's a lot of things happening here in Singapore, some of which will focus on smart meters and demand response. So we'll leave it at that. Please join me in thanking the panelists for their excellent contribution.